All right, here's our problem set. Let me get my name on top. All right, so benchmarks. I hope that you're understanding benchmarks on a number line a little bit. All right, I think using fractions in the number line are it's pretty good. I think that it helps me understand a little bit better what we're talking about, okay? Let me just get myself organized here. Okay. All right, so I take a look at plot the following points, on number line without measuring. So I have to do this without measuring, like we kind of did in the last one, right? So I can do that real quick. So I got 1/3, 5/6, and 7/12. Okay, so this would make a good classroom discussion about where things need to be. So let's take a look at that. So here's my benchmarks. 0, 1, and a half. So let's take a look here. So 3 is an odd number, right? So I know that exactly half of 3, there is no really exactly half of 3. 2/3 would be more than a half, and 1/3 is less than a half. So my 1/3 would land somewhere around here, right? Around there somewhere, right? Because that has to be less than a half. Then I look at 5/6. Now 5/6 is an even number. And I know that exactly half of 6 would be 3. So wouldn't 3/6 be exactly half? So 5/6 is actually closer to, it'd be up here in this area, wouldn't it? Because 4/6 would be just a little bit above 3/6. So 5/6 must be up in this region here. There. And then I got 7/12. Now that's interesting. Now, what's exactly half of 12? How many 12ths would I need to have half? And the answer here is 6/12. Isn't 6/12 exactly half? So if my fraction is 7/12, and those are smaller pieces, wouldn't 6/12 be here and like 7/12 maybe like right there, right? Just a little bit above a halfway. So that'd be 7/12. So now take a look. I just compared my fractions using a number line, and basically benchmarks are common sense of where the halfway point is, okay? And that's what I just figured out. Now, if I'm splitting this into thirds, wouldn't this be 1/3, 2/3 probably right here, right? And then 3/3. 12ths, right, would be, by the time I get to here, I have to have 6 cuts. You know what I mean? All right, so now we're going to use the number line in part A to compare the fractions by writing greater than, less than, or equal to on the lines. So we see here 7/12 and 1/2. So here's 7/12, there's 1/2. We can see that 7/12 is greater than a half. And then I have 7/12 and 5/6. We can see here on the number line, see how this one's closer to 0. The higher we go in the line this way, the bigger the fraction. 7/12 is less than 5/6. Okay. Nice. All right, let's take a look at number 2. It says plot the following points in a number line without measuring. So, okay, I can do that, I believe, because I'm going to use my benchmarks. All right, so let's start off with 11/12. So if I cut this line out from 0 to 1 into 12ths, and I'm at the 11th one, man, I'm going to be pretty high in this list, aren't I? Yeah. Halfway on 12ths would be 6/12, because 6 is half of 12, right? So 11/12 would be way up here, because just one more 12th would get me to 1. So 11/12 is a pretty high fraction. So I'm going to write that in right there. Then I've got 1/4. And I know that half of 4 is 2. So if I had 2/4, I'd be right here exactly at a half. So 1/4, again, is down here. And I feel pretty confident about that. Then there's 3/8. And I say, all right, this same number line is cut up into 8 pieces. That's my units. And I'm at the 3rd mark on that. I know that I'd be less than a half. And how do I know that? Because exactly half of 8 is 4. So 4/8 would put me exactly at a half. So 3/8 must be like in here somewhere, you know? So I'll put that right there. So I think I'd have to count 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to that point. So now I've got my fractions laid out without measuring, just kind of estimating where they need to be, comparing them to where 1/2 is. So now what we're going to do is select 2 fractions from part A and use the given number line to compare them by writing greater than, less than, or equal to. Okay? So let's do 3/8. And let's compare that to 11/12. What am I putting in there? Greater than, less than, or equal to? Right, so if I see 3/8 is much less than, isn't it? That's less than 11/12, okay? So it says, explain how you plotted the points in part A. This is part A right here. So we plotted the points in part A. Notice how I'm restating the question. In part A, by comparing our fractions to the benchmarks of 0, 1/2, and 1. Okay? Looks good. And now let's check out the back. Okay. So here is compare the fractions given below by writing greater than, less than on the lines. Give a brief explanation for each referring to the benchmarks of 0, 1, and 0, 1/2, and 1. Okay? So I'm not going to write down all my explanations here, okay? What we're going to do is you guys are going to discuss this as a class if you need to, okay? So we're going to notice here 1/2 and 3/4. All right? I need to compare these two. Which one's greater? All right? And as I look at half is exactly half, right? 3/4 is more than a half, because wouldn't 2/4 be a half? So 1/2 is less than 3/4. Okay? Let's take a look at B. I got 1/2 and 7/8. I know my answer to this right away. And the reason is because exactly half of 8 is 4. So if this was 1/2 and 4/8, I'd have an equal sign there. But it's not 4/8, it's 7/8. It's much higher than 4/8. So I'm going to put in a less than sign there again. Now let's take a look at 2/3 and 2/5. Now you may look at that and go, I don't really quite know here, but I'm going to give you a hint. When you have odd numbers like this, there is no halfway point. You're either less than a half or you're more than a half, okay? So I look at 2/3. 2/3 is on the higher end. It's really close to 3, isn't it? So that's going to be more than a half. If I look at 2/5, I know that's less than a half, right? Because 3 would be more than a half. See, it's like right there between it. Like 2 is less than a half and 3/5 is more. So this would be greater than, because I'm trying to compare that to the halfway point. Okay, now here is 9/10 and 3/5. I can compare these. I can compare these in a multitude of ways, but I know this. 9/10 is almost the entire thing, isn't it? And I know that this is really close to 1, where 3/5 is just a little bit past halfway. So I know that 9/10 is greater than 3/5. Look how close to 1 that is. One more small little tenth and you're at 1. All right, let's take a look at E. I've got 2/3 and 7/8. So I know 2/3 is greater than a half and is closer to 1. And I know 7/8 is greater than a half and closer to 1. Well, which one is greater between the two? And let me give you a hint here. Let's take a look at the missing pieces. Now, there's only 1/8 missing from here for it to be exactly equal to 1. And there's 1/3 missing from this one to make it exactly equal to 1. And isn't eighths smaller than thirds? Isn't it a smaller piece? So this fraction is missing a smaller piece. Therefore, 7/8 would be greater than 2/3. So 2/3 is less than 7/8. It's pretty interesting when you think about it. All right, 1/3 and 2/4. Okay, so 2/4 is exactly half, right? Because if I have 4 pieces and 2 of them, I have 2 out of my 4 pieces, I have exactly half. And then this one is 1/3. Now we've discussed this one already. 1/3 is less than a half, and 2/3 would be more than a half, because there's no halfway point with thirds. So 1/3 is less than 2/4. Close though. Let's check out G. I got 2/3, great, that's more than a half. And then I've got 5/10, which is exactly a half, because 5 is half of 10, right? And I know that 1/3 is less than a half and 2/3 is greater. It's an odd number. So 2/3 is greater than a half. Great. 11/12. Wow, super close to being 1. It's just 1/12 away from being at 1. Then there's 2/5, which the halfway point in 5, there is no halfway point. 2/5 is less than a half and 3/5 is more. So this is less than a half. So 11/12 is much greater than 2/5. And then here, check this out. 49 hundredths and 51 hundredths. Well, I can compare these because my denominators are exactly the same. So I just look at my numerators. 51 is greater than 49. This is comparing apples to apples. Can easily do that. 49 apples is greater than 51 apples. And then last one here. Okay, this one is 7/16 and 51 hundredths. Okay. Now 51 hundredths, just like over here, that's just a tad bit higher than half. Because isn't half of 150? Right, so this is 51, so it's just a touch higher than a half. Then I got 7/16. And I have to ask myself, well, 16 is an even number. What's exactly half of 16? And my answer is 8. So if this was 8/16, I would have exactly half. But it's not, it's 7/16, just a tad lower than a half. So this is just a bit lower than a half, and this is just a bit more than a half. So know that 7/16 is less than 51 hundredths, okay? Well, kids, I hope you had a good time with that, all right? Just kind of reasoning with fractions about the halfway point or 1 or 0, okay? Finding out your benchmarks on a number line really helps us out compared to fractions, okay? By using your common sense. All right, tomorrow we'll work more on this and have some more fun. So, good job today, kids. We'll see you tomorrow.